to infinity and beyond.
Everyone, it's Roger and James here from the DisKingdom podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2's single-player campaign, and we're going to tell you right now, there's going to be spoilers. We're going to be just talking a little bit about the story, because last time we talked about it, we kind of wanted to keep off of it, but this time we kind of wanted to go into it in its full glory of where we, of course, find out that Eden turns to the good side. Hardly unpredictable, I know, and I know I just ruined it, but we did say it was a Spoilercast, and it said it in the thumbnail.
It is a spoiler, but it happens within like the first 45 minutes of the game. So
way too quick.
For one, I guess might as well just jump into it. I didn't want Inferno Squad to convert at all. I actually wanted this to stay a dark side story. That said, I assumed that if they were going to defect, it would be at the end of the game. I was not expecting 30 to 45 minutes into the game. It's like, here's your X-Wing jumpsuit, which you're now going to tie around your waist for whatever reason. And congratulations, you're a rebel now. It's like, wait, what? Yeah. I was told this would be an Imperial.
Yeah. It's odd, because obviously the storyline going along, this whole thing about her kind of just sort of she's obviously not quite feeling it, and the fact of when her dad wants to blow up her own planet definitely kind of gets into that weird thing of like, no, you can't do this, and I'm going to say I've got to save my people. And there's a little bit like, already? Okay, it's kind of just it. I mean, she talked. I mean, there's a few things that there was like. I mean, they did like that subtle thing about she said something, and then one of the other guy was like, "Ooh, that's a bit treasonous about the Empire dying and all this." I mean, even in the book, there was that thing of she turned and she kind of. They didn't really hint at it too much, but there were still a few little subtle hints even in the book, I felt.
Well, especially if you read the book, the idea behind Iden was always that she knows the Empire isn't perfect, but it's better than the alternative in her mind. The rebellion is chaos. People die in chaos. Chaos is not good for the galaxy. So, the Empire might do bad things sometimes, but the order that it provides is better on the whole. It's for the greater good. And that was her perspective. And then to come into this situation where her dad's just like, the Emperor, who is dead, has ordered us to nuke our home planet. And she's just like, that whole greater good thing, I don't really believe it anymore. And she defects. The actual setup to it isn't terrible, especially if you've read the book and you get the whole background for it. I think my problem with it is that you never feel an emotional impact from it. No. Once the decision is made, and everything from that point forward is like, screw the Empire. We're going to shoot every Imperial we find. That guy, he might have been my friend last week, but I'm shooting him in the face. So.
Yeah, it felt very kind of just turning a switch.
Yeah, I was Imperial, now I'm a rebel, and I have no emotional or moral quandary with this at all. Yeah,
I mean, they made a little quip, I think, here and there, like, oh, make sure you shoot the right ones kind of thing. And just as a whole, it just felt very much like, I mean, the thing when you played as Luke Skywalker, which felt very, like, jarring. I remember the first time I played it, where I suddenly started playing as Luke Skywalker, like, whoa, where's Aiden gone? I wasn't expecting to play as heroes. I wasn't expecting that when I was playing it. And it was like, and then obviously we're helping Dale, and it was a bit like, I could see from his point, that felt like it did a better job of turning him, because it was like, oh, he's just been shown that the rebels aren't about killing, and Luke's just saying, well, you didn't fight back, and I don't want to kill you if you don't need to, and that felt like that made a lot more sense than I mean, obviously Iden had, you're going to blow up our home planet, which didn't make any sense at all. It's like, you've got a whole planet of, why would you destroy your own planet to show strength when you've just been defeated? You want to take out, it's like, you're going to need your people, you don't, it's like, I think it just seemed very odd.
Yeah, and in fairness, Operation Cinder, which was the overarching part of this plan, was created many years ago during the build-up to The Force Awakens. It was the prime story for the Shattered Empire comic book series. So this isn't...
All right.
That story isn't the fault of EA. They're actually picking up pieces that were laid out previously. They had only previously mentioned Naboo, so these other planets are new, but it's still the same idea. That said, you were talking about how Luke Skywalker showed Del Meeko, the rebels aren't necessarily bad. I don't want to kill you. I only do it because you're trying to kill me.
Yeah.
But then nothing ever happens with that, because you could have had this great little scene where, right after Del Meeko and Iden, they decide to run away, to not destroy their planet or to evacuate these civilians that they protected. And they could have just been like, all right, this is pretty terrible. I still think the rebels are pretty awful, though, so we can't join the rebellion. And then Del Meeko's kind of like, hey, actually, they're not that terrible.
Yeah.
But you never get that scene. You never get that. It's just immediately, oh, well, the Empire is truly evil. We're rebels now, even though I've been fighting against rebels for the last several years. There's never that conflict. And I feel like this game had the same thing that happened with Destiny, the first one, where there was this big sweeping story, and then bit by bit it just got chopped away as maybe the deadlines got close, or management came down and go, no, it's too complicated, people won't get it. It's like, you maybe give people a little bit of the benefit of the doubt here. So yeah.
I also felt like the speed in which the rebels gave them weapons and put them in space together fighting them was like, you just literally, we've just captured you. It's like the police go, just captured you. Oh, here, jump in the police car and arrest somebody, arrest you. No, it's like that. It felt so forced, literally. Where it was like, it just was like, come on, we need a little bit better than that.
But if Lando stands up for you, because Lando is clearly one of the most trustworthy people in the rebellion. If Lando stands up for you, then why are we staying with an X-wing? Let's give these guys a Corellian Corvette. Give them control of a Mon Calamari cruiser. I mean, Lando stood up for it. Yeah, I agree completely. It's like, not only do they not have that moment of like, that conflicting moment. The rebellion doesn't have the conflicting moment. It's like, you've killed hundreds of our friends. You infiltrated this rebel group and killed these people.
I killed an entire spaceship full of people in my first
I know,
mission.
right? Yeah. It's like,
one winata.
Whatever, it was last week. We're fine now. The Death Star blew up. That means everything's off now. It doesn't matter that you're a highly trained commando.
Yeah.
Who totally could be doing this just to infiltrate us.
And she's already been probably humiliated the fact that she was a turncoat but wasn't. She's even got evidence that she's done this before.
Right. If you've read the book, there is evidence that she was tossed out of the Empire as part of an elaborate plan to infiltrate the rebels, which she did successfully. And now, like, you want an X-Wing? Sure, have an X-Wing.
Yeah.
Like, what? I mean, yes, obviously the game would end very abruptly if they did the logical thing. It's like, no, you're going to retire now. We appreciate that you brought this information to us, but your choices are: we execute you for crimes against us, or you quietly retire.
Yeah.
That's what I would actually expect. Obviously, it'd be a very short game in that case, even shorter than it already is. But this is the problem with that game: that story is that they want to get from point A to point B, and they never give us that middle section. You just go A to B. There is no journey. It needed another level or another cut scene. It needed a little, because it's funny, because I heard quite a few people kind of talking about how the single player was a bit of a disappointment. It didn't quite live up to the hype. And I think a lot of it was that a lot of people were expecting her to be this character to be this badass Empire, character that was gonna, and then she just kind of flisses her. Now, before we go, and this is kind of where things go a little bit interesting, because before we get into like the end bit of it, obviously we have that big battle then with her father, where the father then kind of eventually just kind of slightly
does a babyface turn at the very last second about going down with his ship, but he still wants to save his daughter, even though it's like I hate it when they do that. I hate it when they try to turn the bad guy right at the last minute. So you suddenly feel worse when they die. It's like, no, I still feel the exact same way. It doesn't matter. But that whole thing of her trying to get into that ship to try and get to him just felt a little bit. Again, just I don't know, just jarred a bit.
Well, I'm going to actually step back a little bit from that. This is the core problem with the story. I mean, we've talked about little individual bits that are problems. This is the real problem with the story. There is no villain in this story. There is, Hask, who was a member of Inferno Squadron and does not defect, and then there's Aiden's father. But in terms of like an overarching villain, neither of them are it. Most of the game is literally the villain is the Empire.
Yeah.
It's not a person in the Empire. It's not the Emperor. It's not Grand Admiral Sloane. It's not any of these people. It's just you're going to fight waves and waves of stormtroopers and TIE fighters and the occasional ATST or whatever. Yes, there are hints where they're like, we've got to go after Hask or whatever, but you don't actually do that for another several hours. And then when it happens, it's a single fight between you and Hask through starfighters, and there is no fight against your father.
No.
So you never get any emotional satisfaction as the player being like, I beat the boss, because there is no boss.
Yeah. No, it was an odd one. I mean, they did lots of good stuff. I mean, the only other thing that got me was the expansion of the Inferno Squad to include this other character that just joined. And
the random character.
And he actually did seem like an interesting character, because when he was like interacting with Lando, it's like suddenly, and he was having little quips about being, this odd member. He goes, well, don't worry about me, you just carry on. And I thought he was kind of cool, but again, they didn't develop him enough.
Right. Actually, the mission with him and Lando on Sullust, where they're going after the AT-AT factory, is one of my favorites. Not because the level itself is particularly interesting, although it has some moments. It's the banter between the two characters. It was like, if I'm going to die today, I'm glad you're dying with me. And I'm just like, that's a great line.
Yeah,
that's
it's
a really
kind
great...
like sarcastic tone, but it wasn't sarcastic kind of thing. And that's a shame that they didn't really sort of boost him up a little bit. But I mean, I like the fact that like we went back to Jakku, and I love that whole thing of where we were on Jakku and we kind of got in, jumped in our ship, flew somewhere else, did something else. Then we got up and then we flew somewhere. It felt like that would have been quite nice on some of the other levels to kind of feel like it was less than just drop you into a level and jump you out, because it felt like you were moving around a little bit, and I like that whole Jakku battles.
I did, although one observation on that one is one of those areas that you fly to, they're like, oh my god, we're getting overrun by AT-ATs, and you're like, I'm in an X-Wing, I'll deal with this. Oh wait, why am I landing?
Yeah.
Why am I going to take the AT-ATs out on foot when I have an X-Wing with torpedoes? Why am I not destroying the AT-AT with my X-Wing? That was the one moment in Jakku where I was just like, yeah.
And I know, like now we're used to seeing AT-ATs. Obviously like Rogue One, and we saw them a little bit on Jakku, where it's still that thing to me. They're only meant to be used on Hoth. That's the only place. It's still that. As much as they try and get around it, it still feels like they're an ice thing.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. But obviously,
it's not.
As there's more and more movies, they'll kind of break that. But for a very long time, they were only in The Empire Strikes Back plus one brief cameo in Return of the Jedi. So, I can understand that completely.
Right.
Getting back to the story, I think the one last thing to say about this, at least from my point, is we do have that DLC coming out. Should be coming out, I believe, next week to go inside with The Last Jedi. And it's entirely possible that a lot of the complaints we have will kind of be alleviated. Obviously, they're not going back and adding stuff to the previous parts of the game, so that's going to still be a problem. But as we saw in like the epilogue scene or the bridge scene, they did move Hask into direct bad guy territory, where he will definitely be a presence felt in this new expansion. And if they do it right, and if it's not just like a 30-minute mission or something, there could potentially be that emotional resonance to this story that's missing through the entire original campaign.
It's a bit of an odd one because obviously we had that time jump where
Huge jump.
I mean, there's like Kylo Ren walks in, and it's like 30 years later. It's like no, and I'm like, oh come on, I wanted more than a time jump. I wanted some detail here, not just a time jump. And obviously that was cool, and they're on that planet and they're looking for stuff because they're obviously going to find things. And obviously then they kill Dale, but then we find out that they have a daughter, which of course instantly everyone went, it's Rey.
I really hope not, but I don't think it will be.
And it's a bit like, do you really think they're going to take the biggest question from Star Wars Force Awakens and reveal it in a video game?
Not likely.
And if it is her parents, it's like, that's really going to be quite a little bit like, no, I think, I mean, there's this whole thing of, will Rey be a Skywalker? Will she be a Kenobi? Will she be, all this kind of stuff? It's going to be, I don't know, it's an odd one. We're obviously going to find out a little bit more with the new stuff coming out next week, and we'll be talking about that in a couple of weeks once we've kind of played for it all. So it's good. But I must remember that like, coming to a cliffhanger, and it was like, no, this is like just the story started getting good at this point. It's like Kylo Ren coming in. I think as well as anything with Kylo Ren now just feels fresh and new, which is kind of interesting. Yeah,
it definitely did feel like, wait, no, this is the story I actually wanted to be playing in the first place. There's that revenge angle. We've got interesting characters. You've got a villain that you can hate, and none of this was in the original campaign. So we will have to wait and see. I'm hoping that we get like a multi-hour experience out of the DLC. I'm expecting probably closer to like an hour and a half, but because it is free, so there's a certain amount, but it's also pre-planned, and it's been held back specifically for Last Jedi. It's not like something that they've been developing in the background. This is actually core content.
The only thing with that is, it's a bit like, if it's going to spoil stuff for Last Jedi, should wait till after the 15th, 16th anyway. But it's that kind of thing like, well, if it's got nothing to do with Last Jedi, there was no reason to... It's like, if you've just pulled it back to say, we're giving you free... No, you took the story and cut it in half. That's not giving us free DLC. We paid for the single-player campaign, and... It's a bit like, well, we've seen the movie, but you want the sequel, but you've got to wait 2 years. Oh no, we made the ending, but we're going to release that in 3 weeks' time, and you're gonna. I was a little bit like, oh, this is just getting meaty, just getting to the good bit.
Right, this is absolutely the part of the game that I want to play. We will obviously wait and see what actually happens. It could be great, it could be mediocre, it'll probably be somewhere in between. The only other thing I hope for is that they'll announce that Christy Golden will be maybe writing a story about Iden and Delmico that takes place between the end of Battlefront 2 and the start of this DLC adventure. There's a 30-year gap there. I'd love to read more about these characters. Yeah, and also I would really like to see actually the actress and the actors and stuff actually go into spin-off movies. Bring them into that third trilogy. Do something with them. Have them just show up in like Rogue One, or not in Rogue One, but in those new movies that they're creating. Whether or not they're older versions of themselves, because they're kind of got that difficulty bit of obviously she's much younger. But no, I just think as a whole, I mean, I've seen her a lot on the games, but she's doing a lot of different podcasts and stuff, and she just comes across as a very good actress, and she's got personality, which I think Star Wars could sometimes do with a little of that sort of. I mean, she's playing it completely straight. It might be different, but I think it'd be kind of cool to see this crossover, maybe some comic books, kind of. I think there's room to expand her character a little bit, and I think it needs it. Because she's quite a cool character. She is, and she could potentially end up being the new canon version of, say, the main character from the X-Wing video game or the TIE Fighter video game. People who don't show up in the movies, don't show up even in most of the other media, but every once in a while, like oh, hey, that's the guy from the video game, and he's now in Rogue Squadron. He might not get much of a story, or she might not get much of a story, but it's like, oh, I know who that is, and I know her backstory. So it could have that kind of cool thing.
If there are, if like in episode 8 where you got Leia and suddenly she just walks in and goes, I didn't take this to this person, and she just walks off. Just literally something like that would be like, woo!
Right. Actually, there was a moment like this recently. It's not about Iden, but there was that anthology book that came out, which was, I think, From a Certain Point of View or something like that, where it was retelling A New Hope from the point of view of several other different characters. And there's one near the end where they're listing off who survived the attack on the Death Star, and they list off the Y-Wing pilot, which was established in a comic book previously. They don't go into her story at all, but there's like, oh, there's that character. I'm like, oh, I know who that character is because she was in the Princess Leia comic book. And that's what this has the potential to become.
But we'd love to know your thoughts on Star Wars Battlefront 2's main story mode. Comment below, get in touch with us on social media. As we usually, you can check us out on YouTube, so you can hit that subscribe and like button as well. And also, if you really want to keep up with the latest videos, hit that little bell notification so you can keep up with everything that we put up. We have a video every day. You can also subscribe to the audio versions. James, where can they find you?
Find me at heroiclegacy.com.
And on that note, guys, thank you very much for watching. See you guys soon. Later.